You probably think BYD only builds cheap electric hatchbacks for people who can't afford a real brand. That's what almost everyone believes right now watching this video. And that belief just got destroyed in one weekend in England. Because BYD didn't roll out another budget runabout this time. It rolled out a two-door electric supercar aimed directly at the most protected name in the sports car world, Porsche. And here's the part that should worry every Porsche dealer on the planet right now. This wasn't shown quietly in a factory in Shenzhen. It was shown at the Goodwood Festival of Speed in the UK, the exact stage where legacy car brands go every single year to prove they still matter. Ferrari shows up there, Aston Martin shows up there. Porsche itself has used that hill climb for decades to remind the world who owns the sports car conversation. BYD walked onto that stage and planted a flag in the middle of it. But that's not even the wildest part. Welcome to the best automotive channel on YouTube. This is Atif Cars. Stay with me because the next detail is the one that actually changes the math for everyone watching this space. The car is called the Denza Zed. Two doors, a convertible body, built on paper to go straight after the Porsche 911, the same 911 that's been the benchmark sports car for over 60 years. Confirmed direct from BYD tech inside the Denza Zed includes something called DiSus, an intelligent body control system BYD developed in-house rather than buying from a supplier. What does DiSus actually do? It's confirmed to keep passengers pinned firmly in place through high-speed cornering, and it's engineered specifically to stop the car from rolling over during hard driving. That's not a vague marketing promise sitting on a spec sheet somewhere. That's the specific engineering claim BYD is putting its name behind in public at one of the toughest automotive audiences in the world. Now here's where the anchor comes in, and this is the number you need to remember before you keep watching. A Porsche 911 starts at roughly $140,000 in its base trim. That's the number Porsche has protected for generations, through badge, through motorsport pedigree, through a waiting list culture that makes buyers feel like they earned the car. BYD has not confirmed pricing for the Denza Zed yet, and I'm not going to invent a number for you here because that's exactly the kind of fake specificity that gets automotive channels caught lying to their own audience. What is confirmed, though, is something almost more important than the price tag. Denza is no longer a joint venture riding on Mercedes-Benz's name. BYD built this brand together with Mercedes-Benz starting back in 2011. 50-50 ownership right down the middle. Piece by piece, year by year, BYD bought Mercedes out of its own creation. First, BYD raised its stake to 90% in 2022, then 2 years later, it took the final 10%. Denza today is 100% BYD, top to bottom. So when this car goes after a 911, it isn't a random startup punching above its weight class, it's a company that spent over a decade quietly absorbing German engineering culture from the inside before making its move on Germany's home turf. Here's the number that actually changes everything, so don't look away for this one. The Denza Zed runs on BYD's Blade battery packs, flat blade-shaped cells arranged in a tight array specifically to raise energy density while resisting overheating, which is the single biggest failure point in most electric performance cars pushed hard on a track or a hill climb. That one design choice is a large part of why analysts at the bank UBS found that BYD's overall manufacturing cost sits roughly 35% lower than Volkswagen's. 35% lower cost on a company that already sells everyday cars starting around $15,000. Now take that exact same cost advantage, the one built for cheap hatchbacks, and point it straight at a segment where Porsche has been charging a premium for decades purely on reputation. That's the real threat here. It was never about one car looking fast at a car show. It's about the economics sitting quietly underneath it. Let's slow down for a second and actually picture what owning one of these would feel like, because that's the part spec sheets never capture. Imagine pulling up next to a 911 at a set of lights. Same silhouette instinct, low, wide, aggressive stance, two doors, a roof that folds away. Except under the skin, instead of a flat-six engine burning fuel and screaming past 7,000 RPM, you've got a battery pack engineered to survive exactly the kind of hard cornering that used to be reserved for cars costing 3 times as much. The Porsche driver is paying for a badge that's been earned over 60 years of motorsport. The Denza Zed driver is paying, whenever that price finally gets confirmed, for raw engineering numbers instead of racing pedigree. Those are 2 completely different purchases wearing a similar shape, and that's exactly the argument this whole story is forcing onto the table. Quick favour before we go further, because you need to see exactly where this is heading, hit that like button right now, not for me, for the algorithm, so more people who actually care about where this industry is going get to see this before the mainstream car press even finishes writing their headline. Okay, back to the story because it gets more interesting from here.
Here's why the launch location matters more than most viewers realise. This car wasn't unveiled first in the United States, it debuted in Europe, at one of Europe's most watched, most tradition-heavy automotive events on the calendar. If you're watching this from outside America, that detail is worth sitting with for a second. For once, a major manufacturer is putting a developed, non-US market first in line for something genuinely new, instead of testing it on American buyers first and shipping the leftovers everywhere else. American buyers are, for now, on the outside looking in on this one. That's a rare flip in how these launches usually work, and it tells you exactly where BYD sees its real battleground. Not convincing price-conscious buyers in emerging markets who are already sold, convincing European drivers, the same drivers who grew up worshipping German engineering as the gold standard, that a Chinese brand can sit in that exact same garage next to the cars they already trust. There's a quote worth hearing directly here because it isn't coming from BYD's own marketing department, which makes it carry more weight. Eric Hahn, a senior manager at the Shanghai consultancy Sule, put it plainly: a car that pulls international buyers away from names like Porsche helps BYD prove its quality and reliability on a global stage. That's an outside industry analyst reading the exact same signal you and I are reading right now, sitting in front of this video. Here's the part almost nobody outside the industry press is talking about yet, so pay close attention to this next section. This launch isn't happening in a vacuum, and it isn't a one-off publicity stunt. Chinese EV exports overall are expected to hit 10 million units this year, according to the consultancy Alex Partners, a 41% jump compared with 2025. Meanwhile, back home in China, EV deliveries are actually expected to fall around 10% this year, and June deliveries alone were down 7% year over year based on data from the China Passenger Car Association. Read that gap carefully because it explains everything. Domestic demand inside China is cooling fast, so the biggest Chinese EV makers, led by BYD, are pushing outwards, harder, at exactly the same moment demand at home is softening. The Denza Z isn't a side project born out of confidence, it's a symptom of a much bigger, more urgent strategy playing out in real time. And here's a number that should really grab your attention if you want to understand why a company makes a bet like this one. Nick Lai, JP Morgan's head of Asia Pacific Auto Research, pointed out that Chinese automakers are currently earning around 5,000 yuan in net profit per vehicle on home turf in China. That same vehicle sold overseas, where prices run higher, can generate as much as 4 times that margin. 4 times the profit, same car, different market. That's not a rounding error in a spreadsheet somewhere. That is the entire reason a company builds a Porsche fighter and chooses to debut it in England instead of Shanghai. It's simple math dressed up as a supercar. Now, does any of this mean Porsche should panic today, right now, this week? Not yet. And I want to be straight with you here instead of overselling this story just to get views, because that isn't how we do things on this channel. BYD hasn't confirmed a price for the Denza Z, it hasn't confirmed a delivery date for markets outside China, or even a firm production number. Porsche still holds a badge with over 70 years of racing history behind it, a global service network that took decades to build, and a resale resale value story that no new entrant builds overnight, no matter how good the engineering is on paper. What is confirmed is the technology inside the car, the venue where it was shown, the ownership structure behind the Denza brand, and the clear direction BYD is travelling in. What is not confirmed yet is whether ordinary buyers, the ones who currently save for years to justify a Porsche badge on their driveway, will actually cross that line once this car reaches real showrooms with a real price tag attached. That gap between confirmed engineering and unconfirmed buyer behaviour is exactly what we'll be tracking closely on this channel as more details come out over the next few months. And here's something worth remembering before anyone dismisses this as just another Chinese brand chasing headlines. Goodwood isn't a venue that hands out stage time casually. Manufacturers fight for slots there because the crowd walking through that event includes buyers who can actually afford a 911 and journalists who spent entire careers gatekeeping what counts as a real performance brand. Getting a debut slot at that event for a brand that didn't even exist as a fully independent company until 2024 is its own kind of statement, separate from the horsepower, separate from the battery chemistry. It's BYD telling the exact audience Porsche depends on, we're not asking permission anymore, we're just showing up. One more thread worth keeping an eye on before we close this one out, and I promise to bring you the full story soon. Denza isn't BYD's only move into premium territory. There's also Yangwang, BYD's other high-end brand, and the numbers quietly coming out of that side of the business are just as aggressive as anything we covered today. That's a full separate video on its own, so make sure you're subscribed if you want that one the moment it's ready, because I don't think most channels are covering it yet. So here's my question for you, and I actually want a real answer down in the comments, not just an emoji and nothing else. Are you in the camp that says a Chinese brand can never truly replace the feeling of a Porsche badge, no matter what the spec sheet says on paper? Or are you in the camp that says performance and cost always win eventually, badge or no badge, given enough time? Or are you somewhere in the middle, genuinely undecided, just waiting to see the real price tag before you pick a side at all? Drop your camp below and let's actually argue about it properly. This is Atif Cars. We'll keep watching this one closely because the moment BYD confirms an actual price for the Denza Z, you will hear it here first before almost anyone else covering this industry. And if you're new here, this is exactly the kind of story we cover on this channel. Not just what a car looks like, but the actual numbers sitting behind the decision, the margins, the ownership history, the market pressure forcing a company's hand. Anyone can tell you a car looks fast. Not many channels will actually walk you through why a brand nobody expected is suddenly aiming at Porsche's front door with real figures instead of guesses. That's the difference here, and that's why it's worth sticking around for the next one.